Good morning, everyone. It's Julia Yarbough. Welcome to Sunday morning. Welcome to October. Welcome to a new fall season. And of course, welcome to Keeping It Real Caregiving. I'm your host, Julia Yarbough. I'm coming to you live from Northern California. We have a gorgeous Sunday morning out here on this coast. And before we even dive in anything, I would like to send my concern and well wishes and positive energy to all of my friends, colleagues, total strangers, everybody in Florida. I've lived through hurricanes. I've covered hurricanes. So our hearts go out to you. And we know it's going to be a kind of a long road ahead, but we're all in this together. You know, I like to say that. So without any further ado, I am going to dive right in this morning. For those of you who are just joining the Keeping It Real Caregiving platform, I'll give you a quick background. This idea started because I was a family caregiver to my mother, Miss Nellie, for many years. And as I was going through the process, I learned that there was a lot of information that I didn't know, although I thought I was prepared. And so I lost my mother in 2020 at the age of 90. And I decided that I wanted to share stories, information, create a platform where people can come together and also trade information. Hence, Keeping It Real Caregiving was born. Again, my background is as a news broadcaster and reporter. So I thought, what better way to share my personal experiences of everything that I went through with my mother, combining it with my skills as a reporter and interviewer. And ta-da, we have Keeping It Real Caregiving. And this morning, I'm trying something a little different. And I am on the StreamYard platform, which I love. And I'm still juggling being a producer and on air at the same time. And you can join live on Facebook. You can join in my Facebook group, Julia Yarbough Media Group. You can follow on YouTube. And for those of you who are in the Keeping It Real Caregiving private Facebook group, the stream should also be there. So this morning I decided I'm going to build our show almost like a real television show, right? With segments. So let's get started with, I did my little introduction of who I am. A couple of housekeeping notes. You can put your live chats into the chat box and I will work to monitor those. I see one person that says good morning, just a Facebook user. So wherever you're chiming in from, thank you. This morning, we are going to be talking about long-term care insurance. And we'll get to that in a moment. And Jenny Marie, good to see you. I recognize that name, I think. And so we have a special guest, and the interview with the special guest is pre-recorded. Sometimes time schedules don't quite work out. So this morning, what I wanted to do was start with a couple of other news headlines that you may have missed from this past week. I have most of those in the Keeping It Real Caregiving.bulletin.com newsletter. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so. This is a labor of love to build out more of us working together. I launched the website the newsletter went live last August. So there is a full year's worth of articles, what I like to say, practical, tactical, emotional items that come into play as family caregivers. And you can go in there and read through the previous articles, information on household items, things to think about with nursing homes, with assisted living, items to think about of building your care circles with families. So a lot of good information. And so check that out. And I would love to comment in there, give me ideas of other topics we should cover. If you have a personal story that you would like to share, there is some information that you can contact me there and consider sharing your story with others. So with that, let's dive into a couple of things that I wanted to talk about this morning as we get started. If you are a family caregiver and you feel as if for years your voice has not been heard, or some of the issues that we face, the challenges of finding care, paying for care, getting the family to help, having your employer be aware of what's going on. Great news for all of us that on a national level, people are listening to us. It is coming together. And so I want to share with you this page. And so as you can see here, available now, the 2022 National Strategy to Support Family Caregivers. This is amazing news. And so what exactly is this? I am going to share with you a little bit of the information. I'll read through the press release that came out, and this is from the Administration for Community Living. So this is at a federal level, but this means that from the top down, agencies are paying attention to what caregivers need. Now, it may still take time for this ship to turn, but let me read to you the overview. The 2022 National Strategy to Support Family Caregivers was created to support family caregivers of all ages, from youth to grandparents, regardless of where they live or what caregiving looks like for them and their loved ones. The strategy was developed jointly by the advisory councils created by the Raise Family Caregiving Act, again, that's a federal level, and the Supporting Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Act. That was also with input from the public, meaning my voice, your voice, all of us, family caregivers, and those that they support. Now, this national strategy will continually be updated in response to public comment, meaning all of us putting our voices in. Now, the strategy will be open for public comment beginning as of yesterday. And the information of how to subscribe, you can find that in the newsletter that posted earlier this week with this same banner titled into it. So again, you can find that at keepingitrealcaregiving.bulletin.com. And the strategy consists of the following. So basically, I'm clicking on a different page so I can share this with all of you. It is a 102-page document. Clearly, I'm not going to read through all of that this morning. But the main crux of this is that it is geared towards older adults, again, and people of all ages with all types of disability. So it's not just an elder care for caregiving. It's also people with disabilities, people with chronic health conditions. We're talking cancer, diabetes, arthritis. As I scroll through here, adults and children with ID and DD that may require assistance. Also, children in the full-time care of relatives, meaning grandparents. A lot of grandparents are caregivers. And older adults who are affected by Alzheimer's disease and other related dementias. Veterans with injuries or chronic conditions. So we're talking a wide range of people who fall under this. And people who live in nursing homes, board and care, and assisted living facilities. And there's one Facebook user that says you can't seem to see the video. So can anybody else pipe in there? Can you see my screen showing just the slate of the available now 2022 National Strategy on Family Caregivers? So it's not an actual moving video. This is just a full screen that I have up. And I'll pop back over here to me so that and let me know if you can see that. Okay. Okay, perfect. Jen Baker, yes, you can see it. Lisa Carter, you can see it. Okay, so Facebook user, double check. Again, this was just a slate and not a video, not a full video. And as I go back and forth here between my notes so that I can read through the press release. Okay, and so this is something that I really want you to pay attention. And again, this is where we need to make sure that we get involved on a local level with our local legislators. If you need to write letters to your editor, some information at the tail end, but I also want to mention that all of us should, by the end of today, I want you to do a search for your city and your county and your state and locate your area agency on aging. That's going to be one of your first places to start to find out how these national processes then trickle down into your area, because the national strategy also includes government actions that address our caregiving issues, and we all know what some of those are. Access to respite services. How important is that for all of us? Those moments when you are overwhelmed, you need help, you're not sure where to turn, you may need respite services. So AmeriCorps Seniors will be the agency falling under this federal level that will offer, excuse me, professional short-term care and help for family caregivers looking to take a break. And then you say, okay, well, how do I find them? That's where getting in touch with your local area agency on aging should be your first starting point. Okay, now to that point, I actually just got this in the mail, and Jen Baker, I love that you popped in saying AmeriCorps seniors. So I don't know if you can see this. I just got this card in the mail yesterday from my local area agency on aging. And see there, AmeriCorps seniors, we need your experience today. I'll read you the back of the card. It says, we have many different volunteer roles for Americans 55 plus that need your experience and compassion. Help children learn to read, deliver food and care to older neighbors, right? So those are the types of respite services. So again, AmeriCorps seniors is part of this program. So reach out to your local area agency on aging. Do a quick online search and you can find the one for your area. The national strategy also covers support with day-to-day and complex medical tasks. I have major frog in my throat this morning. Offices throughout the government, meaning different agencies, will coordinate with states to grow and strengthen the direct care workforce to help more family caregivers with caregiving tasks. And again, this is where we have to stay plugged in on that local level. I know that here in California, our California Department for Aging has been doing more work to train a larger workforce to help family caregivers, right? And so this is where, again, I know you're tired. I know you have a lot of work on your plate, but it is so important for us to reach out to our local agencies, let them know what we need, and stay on your local elected representatives and your state representatives to say, look, we're family caregivers. We need help. We need services. We need respite. And if you're not sure what to do or what to say, have them look to California, okay? Because we have a master plan for aging that several other states are now looking at copying, and it is robust, it is wide-reaching, and it trickles down from the state level down to local. One of the other things that I really like about this national strategy is inclusion of caregivers in the care teams, meaning the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid will update rules to include family caregivers in hospital discharge, planning process, so that those transitions are smoother for everyone involved. How many of you have had their experience where somebody you love is in the hospital and you really don't know what comes next? You're not sure about the process of what you're supposed to do, what you're supposed to navigate. And then you think, well, wait a minute, what next? So this having caregivers in that process will be able to help. Okay, so I'm getting a couple of messages. Facebook users, you said you can see but not hear. Give me a thumbs up, folks, if you guys can hear me. I think somebody would have said that you couldn't hear me by now. So Facebook user, it may be something on your system. Jenny Marie, is income a qualifying factor for help? It seems that was the biggest issue for me. And in some instances, when you're dealing with Medicaid, yes, because many of the programs available are based on financial need. And again, these change from state to state. And I do want to make sure that everybody understands the difference. Medicare, which is the federal level, does not pay for family caregiving services. Okay, Medicare does not pay. Medicaid will help cover various services for care, but again, it's based on eligibility, right? And so a lot of that depends on which state you are in, right? The other item, financial education on caregiving costs. This is a big one for all of us. How are we going to pay for all of this care? So some of this national strategy, as you said in this chat, you said, Robin, you said you need more information. How do we find it, right? And so financial education will be included, that our local agencies will bear more of that to make sure that we understand, that we don't have to dig all of this out. Okay, what does it cost us? right? It is not cheap. It is not cheap to care for people in facilities. Better identification of family caregivers. That's another key element. Departments across the government will pilot identification of family caregivers in electronic health records and state information systems, conduct localized outreach, and share information with family caregivers about various support available. So again, this goes to that level of, I'm learning since I started Keeping It Real Caregiving, there is tons of information out there, but you have to dig for it. You really have to dig for it. And so I am hopeful with this new strategy that there is this greater recognition of what we need. And again, this is a federal level, then down to state, then down to local. So please, if there's nothing else you do this coming week, is reach out to your local area agency on aging. Start there so that you are plugged in and know who your local contacts are for various services. For those of you who are robust and are ready to dive in to really do something, then go to your state level. Look for your state's Department on Aging. Some of them are called senior government, others are called Department of Aging, various names, but make sure that the URL is a .gov. If it's a .org, that means it's another organization or maybe a private business. Look for your state's Department for Aging or Senior Services, but make sure it's the .gov. And there's much more of this information in the Keeping It Real Caregiving Bulletin newsletter that posted earlier this week. So you can find that online. The other item that I wanted to share with you, I'm going to remove this slate and then I'm going to add this one. So this is really exciting for me. This is a small item that, well, actually it's not small, it's big. So again, California for the last 2.5 years has been driving through with the master plan for aging. When Governor Gavin Newsom first took office, in his first State of the State address, he said to everybody, our state has an aging population. This is going to impact transportation, housing, medical, services, caregiving, employment, all of these things. We have a very diverse state based on urban, rural, in between, older, younger, ethnicities. All of these things are so different from place to place. We need a plan. How are we going to adapt as our state ages and make sure that we're getting the right services to people who need them? Well, you know me, and those of you who are just getting to know me, I like to get involved and dive in and make things happen. So I was able to get involved with the Master Plan for Aging through the California Department of Aging, and I am one of the members on the Equity in Aging Advisory Committee. That's why if you see my various Facebook posts and I say, listen, I want to hear from you. Tell me your challenges. What questions do you have? What needs do you have? How can I help you? And then how can I also help that next level of state policymakers really understand what we need on the ground, right? They need to hear our voices. I know sometimes we need to just get together and vent, but we also need to take action. So on this Equity and Aging Advisory Committee, several of you submitted your challenges. I then submitted those to my equity committee. And from all the information that the committee members submitted, the leaders narrowed it down to just 3 recommendations. And as you can see here, this 3rd recommendation drives to the point of caregiving for people at home. And it specifically talks about expanding respite care and track access and utilization among various communities. So the support family caregivers, predominantly women who are working and spending all of your out-of-pocket money on care. I just want to say congratulations to all of us. It may seem odd that we're all virtual and we can't really connect, but this is why when you see my post and I say, tell me what's going on with you. What do you need? Please respond. Drop questions in the chat. Drop comments about different stories. Continue doing that because we do have a direct line. It may take time to turn this ship, but we're doing it. So congratulations to all of us. This is very exciting. This will be items that will be put into place for the next 2 years of the master plan as we go into 2023 and 2024. So I love that. Now, I want to dive into, let's see, let me remove this from the screen. Okay, so this morning we have a pre-recorded interview. It runs about 11 minutes. And if, give me a show of hands if halfway through you guys are going, yeah, way too long, Yarbough, we need to dump out of this. Let me know. And so we're talking about long-term care, LTC, not TLC, tender loving care, but long-term care. Why is this important? Quick story. So years ago, I had an HR director who asked me about my personal life and who else was in my family. And I said, well, I take care of my mom and excuse me, more than likely, I will be her primary caregiver. Luckily, that HR director, and I give a huge shout out to Ellen, who helped me with that. And she said, you should consider long-term care insurance. I had no idea what that was. But I purchased a policy. I didn't really understand it, but I purchased something. And it was so when we got to the point where I needed to have care for my mother because I saw it coming, I was able to then pay for having help come to my home. Because again, Medicare does not pay for caregiving services. So I didn't have a lot of coverage, but it was enough that I was able to get additional help. And then when the time came that my mom had to be moved to facility care, excuse me, losing my voice this morning, I was able to help pay for some of that. So long-term care insurance, what is it? How does it work? We can't dive too deep into this because there are so many moving parts and everybody else, all of you have a unique experience. But my guest, Vickie Frazier-Williams, specializes in helping people work through long-term care insurance, understanding what it is, what their needs are, different policy amounts, length of time, types of coverage to be able to have help in home, in facilities, and to be able to look at it as an investment in your future and that of your loved one. I can tell you, had I not had long-term care insurance for my mother in place, I would have had to stop working several years back because I would have needed to just be home to take care of my mother. And so for those who have the means to afford a little bit extra, whatever little bit, and you don't have to work with this particular person, but let's dive in. Let me show you the interview with Vickie Frazier-Williams. Let's see, where is that interview at? Here we go. I'm going to add this in and hear a little bit about long-term care insurance. And then in the meantime, I'll get my voice back. Talking about planning for our futures in a very practical and applicable way that all of us should think about. We are going to be talking about long-term care. And I am really excited to welcome our guest this morning, Vickie Frazier-Williams. She is joining us from South Florida. Vickie, thank you so much for being here on Keeping It Real Caregiving for round two.
I enjoy being here. Thanks for inviting me.
And for those of you who perhaps did not see one of our first interactions, Vickie Frazier-Williams is a financial coach helping all of us plan for the future. But you say you're also a legacy coach, which I love how that sounds. Explain to our Keeping It Real Caregiving family exactly what that means and why it's so important.
Legacy. A lot of times we are not thinking about the fact that we are leaving a legacy when we leave here. And you can either do it on purpose or by accident. And I like being able to talk to people about leaving a legacy that matters and doing it on purpose. And what that calls for, Julia, is being prepared and having a plan and looking into the future as to, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen. But one way to deal with whatever happens is to think about it ahead of time and put some plans, some strategies in place. And so that's what legacy for me, coaching is for me.
And I have to tell you, folks, Vickie has been wonderful. In full disclosure, I have worked with her in the past as on-air reporters, but we've also worked together recently because I made the decision that I wanted to make sure that I put long-term care insurance in place. This is something that I've talked about for months. And Vickie helped me navigate those waters, figure out what I needed. So let's talk a little bit about that. Long-term care. We hear those letters. Why is this so crucial in terms of protecting our future for our care and also our finances?
Julia, we are living longer than ever before. It's a probability that a lot of us will live longer. And in that life, it's almost inevitable that the longer we live, the more real it will be that we will need some help. There is a possibility, a probability that we will need some kind of long-term extended care help. And the question needs to be asked while you're young, healthy, right? Who will be there for me should I need help in the future? And that's what long-term care conversations allow us to talk about is who is your who? If you are not able to take care of yourself, who are you going to lean to? And I don't let my clients skip out of that question. I had someone tell me just a couple of days ago, you're just not going to let me not answer that, are you? I said, no, because think about it. You got to decide who is there for you. And I'm so proud of you, frankly, that we went through some time of figuring out, what does that care look like? What does it need to cover? How long does it need to cover? And what's it going to cost? Those are all the questions, that you, of course, made sure you got answered to your satisfaction before we closed any kind of policy.
And that's one of the things that I can't stress enough to our viewers, that planning ahead. And I want to share with everybody, you were kind enough to share some information that we talk about this idea that it's a tough topic because nobody wants to think about it, but we are living longer. And that means we don't just age and then retire and sit and watch television. You've heard me say it before, we get older and then things decline. We get older and maybe we can't do. We get older, but we keep living. Who is there to help us? And that's where this comes in, as you say on your slide here, having a strategy for long-term care is a necessity, and it gives you added peace of mind. And for those of you who are already family caregivers or looking at family caregiving, and Vickie, you've been in this, we can think about the loved ones that we're helping, but I really want people to start thinking about us, right? Because once our loved ones pass, we're the next in line, right? That means we have to think of all of the issues and roadblocks and challenges we've experienced. What will that look like for us? And if you could talk a little bit again about the necessity or the importance, especially for women of color, and for those who don't have children. This is crucial that we think about all of this.
It's interesting that was the last part of your question, those of us who don't have children. Honestly, Julia, yes, I went through it with my mom and dad. Both of them needed care before they relocated to heaven. And it was after that time that and it was actually my husband who said, you know what, Vickie, we don't have children like mom and dad did to come in and take care of us if we needed that help. So what are we going to do? And in all honesty, that is when we took out coverage. Women, we tend to live longer than men. And what happens is many times we become that caretaker for our husbands, for our mom, for our dad, for family, other family members. The vast majority of caregiving is actually taken up by a family member. But if we plan for what might be an inevitable occurrence, then we have some choice. Right now, you have a choice as to whether or not planning out, you have to have some care, whether you're going to go into a nursing home or you're going to have that care at home. You have options now, right? While you can strategize and decide on how you want that, not only retirement, but that time where you might need some care, what you want that to look like. You have some control now. And I think that is the thing that I try to get across to everybody. Make some decisions now. You said it. We don't want to think about that.
No,
we just don't. But inevitably, we will have to, and we will be living through that. So plan now, strategize now.
And some of the ways we do that, and I love that you walk everybody through it. And for those of you joining us, Vickie walked me through this as well, of really thinking about what is our personal plan. And I do want everybody to consider that this will cost you something, right? We have to purchase this, but think about how much money we spend on our cars and on our lawns and on things that come and go in our lives. And this is really about our future, who is caring for us as we age. And I love that you chart this out so that we ask these questions of ourselves and then we can get answers. So these 4 questions, how crucial are these for everybody to really think about?
Critical, crucial, important, and tough, right? Because it makes you get real with you. Who would be in charge of your care should something happen to you?
Mm-hmm.
Where would you prefer to receive that care? At home, in a nursing home? How much does that care cost? And Julia, you just said it. There is a cost to it, right? I always like to tell people there's also a cost to waiting, though, because the older we get, you have to get approved. You have to be allowed to have this coverage. And it's dependent upon your health now and your cognition, your cognitive ability. So the younger we are, the healthier we are, that we put this coverage in place, the better it is for us, and the cost is less. And then lastly, what's the best solution for you and your family? Those are decisions, those are questions, answers that need to be dealt with up front.
And one of the things too that I would encourage everybody to do is, we talked about this, of thinking about who else in your circle and thinking about how you're going to pay for this. And a lot of people hear long-term care insurance and they think, oh, this is just some sort of sham. It's not going to be valuable for me. How have policies changed over the years so that we, the consumers, do have more control over where we have that care and how we are able to choose the care?
Great question. There was a time when you could get unlimited long-term care coverage, meaning it would cover you for the rest of your life. That has changed. The vast majority of those companies are not even in business anymore because people are living longer, almost outliving those coverages. So that has changed. One of the ways that you can do this now, a couple of ways. One, you can pay as you go. You can say, I'm going to put X amount of dollars every month into this policy that allows me at some point, should I need it, to have benefits, daily benefits, be it at home or in a nursing home. That's a critical second part of that. And then there are some which you can put a lump sum of money down in which you pay it off right up front. And there's a life insurance benefit to that as well. And so those of us like myself who doesn't have any children, right? I'm not so concerned about the death benefit. I am concerned about having enough of a bigger pot of money for that care. And by the way, Julia, let me say this too. Sometimes we think about long-term care being something that happens in our old age, but you can have an extended care event that has nothing to do, frankly, with your age, where you need someone to come in and care for you, or you may have to go into a facility. And what's happening around the country actually is states are looking at how if you don't have this outside coverage, there could come a time where it will be taken out of your paycheck, much like Social Security, in order for you to have some coverage should that happen later in life.
Yeah, and those are all such good points to think about. And again, I just want to stress that this is not a free service. You do have to purchase this. And so one of the things that I think people should understand is that not everybody would be able to afford this. But for those who can, what advice would you say to them? If you have the means, what would you say to people?
Look for a good counsel person, someone who can really guide you through it, who understands what's happening out in the community as it relates to long-term care, what are some options and some strategies, not only for you to get the coverage, but also how to pay for it. It is extremely important, the advisor you get and the company you get. Remember, these are long-term coverage policy. So you want them to be around. In many cases, you might not need this coverage until your 70s, 80s, and later, right? So you have to pay attention to, one, your advisor, and two, the company that you're working with, because all of this coverage is primarily based on the claims paying ability of the company. So you want a good, strong, financially strong company and a great advisor who will carefully walk you through what it takes to get this coverage that works for you. Because what works for me might not be what you need, Julia, right? And so you need somebody who's going to walk you through that process.
Now, and I know that this is such a complicated topic and we've just barely scraped the surface, but the whole idea of this is to plant those seeds, to get people thinking about it. I want all of us within the Keeping It Real Caregiving family to realize that if we age, which let's cross our fingers and hope we do, that we may enter these challenges. And as you said, something could happen long before we get older that maybe there's just, a medical situation that we need extra help. So again, if you have the means, think about it, carve out those funds. And Vickie, I'm going to share with everybody your information. And again, I'll stress to everybody, we're not doing a commercial here, but I want you to at least have a starting place that if you have questions, if you'd like more information, those of you who know me, I am a stickler for questions and I can be a trouble client. I ask every question under the sun, and Vickie can attest that I did that as well. And so I feel really comfortable knowing that I made a choice for myself, for my future. So this is all of your information. Anything that you'd like to share with folks as some parting thoughts?
A couple of things. We talk about the money that's involved, and yes, it is. There's a cost to it. But you want to know something? I think what you come away with, what you plan in place, is your peace of mind. That part of that will understand something happens. I've planned. I can be okay, and I will be okay. And so that's important. The second thing that I want to say is, Julia, I just love what you're doing. You've taken your own experience and found a way to reach out and give that experience and that information to other people, because people, as you already know this better than me, are experiencing these circumstances every day. And so this kind of information, what you're doing with Real Caregiver, I love it. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate all of the work that you've done and the patience with me. And folks, I can't stress enough. Do your homework, start thinking about it, read up, and just plant those seeds because it's real. So Vickie, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time and your expertise, and hopefully we can make sure that we educate that many more people out there. So I appreciate you, and thank you
so much, Julia. Absolutely.
All right. So again, thank you to Vickie Frazier-Williams. And in full disclosure, Vickie is a former colleague in the news business with me from South Florida for many years. And she is now in the insurance, financial planning, legacy planning. And I know several of you asked questions. And just to reiterate, this is not a commercial for Vickie, but she's somebody that I trust. And she's somebody that I chose to work with after talking with a number of different insurance agents about long-term care insurance policies. And again, based on personal experience, one thing that I cannot stress enough, once you decide that this is something you want to think about, do your homework, talk to several different agents, ask questions about, first of all, how much it costs. What does it cover? Does it cover across states? Does the policy you're looking at cover for in-home care as well as facility care? And if it does cover facility care, what type of facility care? Are there stipulations between assisted living, which is ALF, assisted living facility, and nursing home, skilled nursing facilities, or a memory care, or in-home care, meaning that you can hire somebody to come to your home. Make sure that you understand the payment or the reimbursement amounts for those coverages. And here's something that's key. I do advocate that if you can afford some sort of coverage, okay, I was in the news business for more than 20 years. I see the things that happen in people's lives that they don't plan for. It just happens. It can happen to all of us. And so I like to be prepared. But here's the other thing to keep in mind, that rates of paying for in-home care or for facility care change from state to state. What it costs me here in Chico for an hour of in-home care may be completely different than what it used to cost me for in-home care in South Florida. So it's important to then look at your policies and say, okay, how much might I need? And I always like to say, I like to work backwards from worst case scenario. If something were to happen and I needed help myself or a loved one, sure, I could probably take care of them at home. I did it once with my mom. But what if I needed to have somebody come in and help me maybe 4 or 5 hours a day? How would I pay for that? How could I cover that? Or what if something happened to me in another year or two and I was in some sort of accident and I needed somebody to come in and help me? So these are all things that I would just encourage everybody to think about. I've been accused of being too serious. I've had people say I worry too much. But again, I've been in the news business for over 20 years and none of us know what may happen. And so I just like to be prepared and think ahead. So if any of you have questions, please drop those into the chat, because if I don't know the answer and I don't pretend to be an expert on long-term care, I can get those questions over to Vickie and then also to some of my other colleagues within the aging field. For those of you just joining, as you may or may not know, earlier this year, I took part in a fellowship with the American Society on Aging. So I was one of 32 fellows in that field, learning about health equity, diversity, more awareness of the intersection of diversity, equity, inclusion in the healthcare field and what it means for securing care, how we distribute services. And so I have a lot of colleagues that I can reach out to get you more information. So if you have specific questions on that, again, in the same way that I said to check with your individual state's Department of Aging, California has a robust insurance office, the State Department of Insurance. And there has been some movement in terms of how the state is looking at long-term care and how we address this to help people. I would advise you to do the same thing for your state. Go online, go to your Department of Insurance and poke around and see if they have any specific information on long-term care insurance. I can tell you with California, one of the things that made me feel a little better of making my final choice of working with Vickie and her company, New York Life, is that New York Life was listed as one of the companies that has already been vetted through the state of California to consider looking at long-term care. And so that made me feel better. So again, a lot of this, folks, people don't have direct answers for you. We can't wave a magic wand. It takes us doing some homework, doing a little legwork, but planning ahead so that we have time. Don't wait until things become a crisis situation. So in fact, I'm going to look up real quickly, a couple of things. I'm going to add this into the stream because I wanted to talk about this. But while this is on screen, I'm going to look up the California Department of Insurance and share that link with you while we're in here. So for those of you who are in California, you will have a place to start at least. And there's a lot of good information in here. In fact, there's they have a whole tab that's called the Long-Term Care Insurance Task Force. Now, if I'm not mistaken, one of the things that I learned about in the California Master Plan for Aging event that I took part in was that the task force is kind of in a holding pattern right now. But here's a link to that site. Even if you're not in California, check this out. It can give you some ideas of, make comparisons between what is happening in your state and around the country. So now I wanted to talk about this last little item before we dive into just opening it up to see what you guys are all thinking about. So again, as I mentioned, I am a completed fellow with the American Society on Aging, our ASA RISE program. 32 of us spent 6 months going through this program. And so now I'm involved with the American Society on Aging, which does a lot of advocacy work, education, medical work, working with different communities. And one of the items that I wanted you to mark down on your calendars, think about it ahead of time. Next Friday, October 7th, is Ageism Awareness Day. Internationally, this has been focused on a little bit more than here in the States, but we're starting to have greater awareness now in terms of, we get a little older and we don't think about some of the discrimination and the ageist acts, the ageist language, the ageist imagery that we see. And so I'm on my phone right now while this is up because there is something that I wanted to share with you as well. And this is some information from the American Society on Aging. And I will read this to you. This is from a press release. And so the Ageism Awareness Day is modeled after the United Nations International Day of Older Persons. Ageism, which is October 1st, which was yesterday. Ageism Awareness Day provides an opportunity to draw attention to the existence and impact of ageism in our society. And you may not think about how many layers there are to this. According to the World Health Organization, there are 3 vehicles through which we can reduce or eliminate ageism, and that's policy and law. That's where ASA comes in. Educational activities, some like what we're doing right now, and intergenerational interventions, making sure that we're connecting across all ages. And so consider this, that quite often, I'm opening up the tab that talks about some of the facts of ageism, and it can be very subtle. We may not even think about it in the moment, but it's something that we should be thinking about. Let's see if this actually opens for me. My phone doesn't want to open. And so I'll have more information on this in an upcoming newsletter this week. But again, mark your calendars for this Friday. And even if it's on social media, make mention to people and say, hey, did you know that it is Ageism Awareness Day? So with that, we have exactly 12 minutes left in our hour. So I wanted to open it up to what I call sound off. And so I want to hear from you guys. And just a lot going on out there. I know some of the challenges of being a caregiver. And in fact, while think about if there's anything that you want to share with others or questions or something that has worked for you, I'm going to open up my Facebook page because in the last couple of days, and also thank you for anybody who has recently followed my Julia Yarbough Media Group Facebook page. Somehow, and I am so thankful for this, we have 14,000 members strong on this Facebook page, which tells me there are a lot of people out there focused on caregiving and wanting information, wanting to figure it all out, right? And sorry for that drop off a second ago, but I just want to read you a couple of the comments that have come in just recently on my page. And some of it really warms my heart because it tells me that people need this help. They want the guidance. Now I have to make sure that I can find my previous page items. And I may do that on my phone as well. But any questions out there this morning? What's going on with everybody? How's everybody holding up? Are you doing anything good for yourselves while you're in the middle of all of your caregiving? Any tips or suggestions for others? Let's not all jump in at once because I know you're out there. All 12 of you, according to the timestamp. What is happening in your worlds? While I look for these other posts, here we go. I want to just read you some of these comments. I was on a really interesting thread yesterday. Here we go. So I love this. This is a person who posted a comment, and they said, I am a CNA, certified nursing assistant, been one for 27 years. All of my clients love me because I go above and beyond, but I am not working for $14 and $15 an hour. Sorry, only $20 and up. And we have talked about that in the past, that, you know, the work of CNAs and caregivers is intense, and we have to be properly compensated. So again, back to that national strategy on family caregivers, states are starting to look at that as well. And Jenny Marie, closure happening in my world. I'm trying to recall if you shared with us if the closure was a loved one or family member. And so first of all, condolences if that was the case, and any feedback on what you're doing for yourself to go through that process. And Angie, so actually, Angie, hold on a second. I'm going to pop your comment up, Jenny Marie. And so you said that it's your mother. And so my condolences. I'm sure she would be proud of you for the work that you did for her and to make sure to help others. If there's anything that we can do as a Keeping It Real Caregiving family, is just to know that you are not alone in that process, and give yourself time to feel whatever you need to feel. I just had a really great conversation with somebody this week who said they had lost a loved one, and they've been on pins and needles because they're waiting for this wave of grief to hit them. And they're so nervous about that they don't think they've been able to grieve. And so give yourself time. We had a Sunday coffee chat a few months ago with a woman who specializes in bereavement. And so you can check that out in one of our previous newsletters. I could try to find it, but then I'll be back and forth on my tabs. But just sending you much love and light, Jenny Marie, and be kind to yourself. And Angie, you say, I cannot trust anyone to help my grandmother, so I can't do anything for myself. All right. So, you know, I think we've all been there a little bit in terms of we tend to not want anybody else. I'm going to get rid of that. It's almost as if we don't want anybody else to be in our space. And so I would encourage you, Angie, to think about your care circle, whether that's family, friends, neighbors. And when you say, I cannot trust anyone, is it that you personally can't trust them, or they truly are not trustworthy people? All right. So that's two different things. I had a hard time with that too, of thinking that there was no way that anybody could do things the way I do it, caring for my mother. It had to be me. It had to be me, because they just wouldn't get it right. And then finally I had to realize, well, wait a minute. My mom was in her late 80s, almost 90s. She was a grown woman. She had clearly lived her whole life. There were things that maybe I was being overprotective on. And to a certain point, I had to give up a little bit of that control just so that I could get help from somebody. Because then if they offered help and I said, no, you're not going to do it right, then they stop asking, you know. So make sure that if there's anybody that you trust, that work to allow yourself, maybe it's even an hour to start. Maybe it's to say, you know what, can you sit with mom or with grandma, and I'm going to run and go get a cup of coffee. And then if it's okay, you know, or maybe you go just in the other room, right? So you're still there in case something happens, but you can give yourself a little bit of wiggle room, right? So there's a difference between allowing yourself to trust and then finding people who are trustworthy. So make sure there's a distinction there. Lisa Carter says, I'm working on getting a for profit to help caregivers to be able to receive wishes like the Wish Foundation, funds to help with a caregiver, PD day, spa day, etc. My mom has dementia, is 89, and I'm a physical therapist who struggles with seeing her decline. Dementia education and caregiving training is important. And yes, Lisa, it is so important. Thank you for sharing that, because as far as dementia, and I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing, my mom was never diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, but in the time that I started working on creating, I'm going to put, let's see, where we go. There we go. In the time that I started working with the Keeping It Real Caregiving concept, I also learned that Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia impact women and people of color at twice the rates of Alzheimer's impacting Anglos, and researchers still don't understand why. So for people of color, it is especially important that we understand some of the signs, symptoms, and things to watch for when it comes to dementia, and to not be afraid to ask for help. And this kind of goes back to what we were just talking about in terms of if there are people around who you trust or people who are just not trustworthy, right? And so I just put into the chat the link for the Alzheimer's Association, alz.org. And if you even remotely are curious about dementia, Alzheimer's, local programs, items that can be of service to you, I highly advise you to check with your local Alzheimer's Association office. Quite often, I mean, they have tons of online courses, seminars, support groups, fact sheets, information, ways to maybe talk with your doctors, items to be on the lookout for your family. And all of this ties back to that working ahead of time. Have the information in advance. I can't stress that enough, because if you wait until you're in a crisis situation, you no longer have time to handle everything. And so, Lisa, I love that you're working on doing that. Yeah, and just even the fact that Keeping It Real Caregiving and the amount of people that are diving in shows that we have so much to share when we do have that knowledge that we can then share it with other people. And so I'll read you one other quick comment just to really drive home this point of how much people are plugging in. That's if my phone allows me to open this up. So I love this comment. This is from a reader, and she says, I truly believe that God placed this. No, she started with something else. She says, I have been a caregiver for 22 years, plus 8 years of caregiving at home. I didn't choose this job, but instead this job chose me. Before I became a caregiver, I was an office person. It all started in Chicago. I worked for the City Department of Health at the time. I loved my job. I was a medical, you have to hit more. I was a medical interviewer. I moved to Louisville, and while living here, my mother became ill. I decided to go home and get my mom so I could take care of her. It was an honor to take care of this beautiful, classy teacher. I have always known my mother never wanted to be in a nursing home. I told her at age 16 that I will always take care of her and she will never have to live in a nursing home, and I kept my word to her. I went back to school to make sure I would have the skills to care for her at home. At the same time, I also took care of 3 children and I adopted them. So this note goes on. But again, just hearing the stories of real people, I think really solidifies, A, we're not alone. B, we have to share our voices. Kind of going back to, I'm going to remove this and add this back up there, right? Going back to this advisory committee, this is proof that when we join forces, when we share our stories, I know it's hard and you think, oh, I don't want to sound like I'm griping. In a case like this platform, we're not griping, we're sharing, and we are driving change. So just remember that when we come together, we truly can make change. All right, so it is exactly 10:30. That was our full hour of this Sunday, October 1st, Keeping It Real Caregiving Sunday Coffee Chat. Thank you so much. And yes, Jen Marie, sharing is healing. Sometimes just talking about it, inventing, and knowing that you're not out there by yourself. So with that, we are going to wrap this special guest. Nope. Added the wrong thing to the screen. All right. So that is it. Well, actually, just one more comment because I don't want to cut you off before I say this. Let me put this up. My son is in the nursing home, and I do everything for my son. When I come to visit, I come to work because they're always short-staffed. Sometimes I go off because I find my son on a way that is not acceptable. I provide everything for my child, even his own linen. So Joanna, you have to be your son's advocate. And thank you for jumping in here and sharing. And yeah, sadly, telling our stories is what drives the change of being able to say to people, we need to let the policymakers know that the very services that we rely on are short-staffed, and then figure out, well, why is that? And the fact that you go to that location, continue doing that, be your advocate for your son, make sure they know you're there, keep an eye on everything, and ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help from family, friends, neighbors, again, people you trust. Build that care circle so that on those days when you say, I just don't have the energy to do it, but I have to go check on my son, have somebody else that you know that you can trust. And I know there's so much to chat about. And so I will close with saying, please, everybody, I would love it if you follow the newsletter, subscribe to Keeping It Real Caregiving.bulletin.com. Put questions into the chat, ideas on stories, topics, information that would be helpful to other people. We're all in this together and we can make a difference. And also keep the comments coming on the Julia Yarbough Media Group Facebook page. I forgot to put my information on screen. These are the different ways you can find Keeping It Real Caregiving. All of these videos go onto a YouTube channel. The YouTube channel isn't actually called Keeping It Real Caregiving, mostly because I already had it established and haven't changed it. So you can find my YouTube channel is also Julia Yarbough Media Group. And all of this information is on there. Subscribe to the newsletter. You can also find information at the keepingitrealcaregiving.com website. And so I will look forward to connecting with all of you. And yeah, just stay in touch online. We got to love social media. All right. With that, I am going to sign off. Thank you so much for joining this morning. Have a wonderful Sunday. I'm going to go have some more coffee and get on with the day. Thank you, everybody. Please take care of yourselves and check out those resources that we talked about. And I'll keep you posted on the next Sunday Coffee Chat. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and be safe. Bye-bye.